Welcome to my teaching learning session. We continue with me BPCC 132, which is a BA course for psychology with me, Sonal Singh. Today we continue with Unit 4 of Social Psychology. We've already introduced what is social psychology and we need to understand how the psyche of individuals and humans function in a society. In presence of people, with the imagined presence of people, and at times even without thinking about other people. So speaking of that, let's continue with attitude change. Attitude is a core concept when we speak about forming and being influenced by other people. As soon as we meet somebody, I'm sure everyone knows that attitudes are formed instantly. Similarly, we are capable of changing our attitudes. The way attitudes are changed, the way attitudes are formed, we can equally make sure that they keep changing with the passage of time when there's a discomfort, when there's a difficulty. So let's continue understanding what are the different ways in which we can change attitude. There are three theories that we are going to discuss today that are going to support us and tell us how we can change attitudes. The first theory that we talk about is by Fritz Heider. Fritz Heider spoke of the concept of balance. So here the concept of balance that we speak about talks about that the attitude change will happen when there is going to be imbalance. And the context of this theory is interpersonal relationships. So, how did Fritz Heider speak about this? Fritz Heider stated that we will understand the concept by POX. So, Fritz Heider stated that if there's an existing balance that must be there amongst interpersonal relationship, which we even feel in our day-to-day language that there needs to be a balance in our interpersonal relationship, isn't it? Similarly, Fritz Heider said if there's a state of imbalance among people in their interpersonal relationship, there is a requirement of an attitude change. Imbalanced structures create a lot of uncomfortable feeling, arguments, conflicts in interpersonal relationship, which is very obvious. And thus we seek to create or thus we seek balance in our interpersonal relationships. So let's understand this in the concept of Heider by POX framework concept. So Fritz Heider gave a concept of POX. Let's understand what is P, O, and X. P is a person, O is another person or a person who is there in terms of comparison or the second one, and X is the topic. X is the physical object, the attitude the idea, the component, or even it could be an event or an object. So let's take an example and understand what is balance and what is imbalance. Balance are when the relationship between, we can understand it in terms of triad, which is given on the image that you see on your left. So balance is occurring when there is all positive relationship. So P should have a positive relationship with O should have a positive relationship about X, and obviously the P should also have a positive thought process about X. So when all the conditions are balanced, it is considered as a balanced state. Also, another second combination, when the conditions are talking about two imbalanced state and any one positive, which is any two negative states and one positive, which is P could be negative to X, O could be negative to X, and P could be positive to O. This is a balanced state. This is the kind of state that I think we would need. And now, what is the imbalanced state when there's a discomfort feeling, when there's a feeling of, conflict, argumentative state? That's when we have all the objects that we speak about as negative. Either we keep all negative, that's something, whether we talk about as balance. So when we talk about balance, remember, go vertically. All positive, two negative, one positive. And if you want to talk about imbalanced state, it has to be two positive and all of them negative. So such states are balanced and some are imbalanced state. We are only talking about balanced state of mind. So it could be two negatives and two positive, etc. So let's take one example and understand how to create this condition. And in contrast, imbalance is always, remember, two positive, one negative, or all of them are negative. So let's take an example of chocolates. P is the mother, O is the child, X is the topic, which is chocolate. So the mother obviously loves the child. The child loves chocolate, but the mother is very disapproving of chocolates. So did you realize it is Again, talking about, when we talk about this, there is going to be somewhat two negatives and one positives. That would be a balanced state. An imbalanced state is two positive and one negative, where the mother loves the child loves the chocolate, but the mother is disapproving of the chocolate, which is again that we talk about is two positive, one negative, or an imbalanced state. We have to create it to this, which is all the balance, or we need to have at least two negatives and one positive. So either we tell the child to stop liking chocolates, so that's going to be two negatives and one positive, which is P. Obviously the mother loves the child does not like the chocolate, and the mother does not like the chocolate. Or either we have to make it all positive, which is mother loves the child loves the chocolate, and the mother loves the chocolate too. That's the balanced state of mind, and a balanced state of attitude. That's how we function when we talk about in the Heider's concept of balance theory. So this is our ideology about balance and imbalance state that we have. Now, that was one way of changing an attitude. There was another. When we speak about Leon Fistinger in 1957, he gave us a concept of cognitive dissonance. Cognitive dissonance is what? Whenever an attitude has cognition, which is moving in different direction. So, which is like if the cognitive to cognition about an attitude is conflicted or is debated. So, if it's refined, debated, again by psychologists, cognitive dissonance is an aversive state of arousal that occurs when a person holds two cognition and both of them are moving in opposite direction. Such, this can actually be explained in such simple ways in today's life. Like even an American Psychological Association defines cognitive dissonance as an unpleasant psychological state which is resulting into inconsistency between two cognition of one attitude. So this could also be, why is this inconsistency not, liked? Why do we need to change this incongruency and dissonance to consonant? Because this gives a feeling of discomfort, it gives the feeling of uncomfortableness, and also it does not make us function well. So let's take an example where people who are eating, any sort of or drinking any sort of aerated drinks that is so banned today, and children are told not to eat. When they love eating it, they said, I love drinking aerated drinks. And the second time they know, it leads to hollowing of bone, higher level of ammonia, and even cancer. So when you know that the same thing that you love are you eating, and at the same time that you know that this is causing other diseases in your body. So the same attitude, two different cognition. That's something that we talk about is dissonance. This dissonance, when is rejecting, confusing, discomfort, creating discomfort, and is difficult to explain, we need to get them into consonance, which is cognitive consonance. That's the time we need to do the attitude change. Now, let's understand what influences cognitive dissonance. There are some influences that is mentioned on the screen. The importance attached to each belief. So, cognitions that are more, we all know, our thought process, the way we rationally put out things are very, very personal to us. Our belief systems are very personal to us. And, beliefs are our own self. It's about us. It's about what we've been, what are the kind of ideologies, whether what we are holding. So obviously cognitions are beliefs, and these beliefs are very personal to us. They're very highly valued. And if they're very highly valued, remember it's going to lead to greater dissonance. So if your cognition is attached to a belief system, you probably might not change it because it's very difficult. It's a part of your your affective, your cognitive state, and you tend to behave it in a similar pattern. Also, if there are too many dissonant beliefs, more the dissonance, greater is the strength of dissonance. So if you have more cognition moving in the opposite and negative direction, or in the opposite direction, remember it's going to be stronger. So let's take another example. For example, we all know as we grow old, too much of social media today is very harmful, not only for physical but also mental body, emotional state. But then we still hold it. What are the different dissonance? It gives you jobs, it gives you a greater pastime, it is the source of entertainment to people. Also, it gives you a lot of education. It's readable. So remember, more the dissonance that you have, the strengthened the dissonance gets. So it gets more difficult to change it into consonant. So this is the belief system. See, smoking cigarette is unhealthy, but obviously, I don't smoke cigarettes anymore. That's an attitude change that we would require. But then I smoke cigarette, and smoking cigarette is unhealthy. This is two moving in separate direction. Now, if it's something which is having too many dissonance, usually my family does it, my friends does it, all in my surrounding does it. So remember, the amount of unpleasantness, tension decreases because there are too many people doing it. The dissonance, as the second point, becomes stronger. So we need an attitude change here, where smoking cigarette is unhealthy and I don't smoke it, I'm trying to quit it. So that's like a belief, and it's the change. And also change of belief would be the research on smoking is not conclusive. I continue to smoke cigarettes. That's a change in belief. You've made it consonant, but on the changes of the belief system. You disapprove that there are any sort of researches that talks about smoking to be harmful. So you're doing that, but with lesser dissonance in mind. So that's another theory which talks about attitude change. Now, also cognitive dissonance can make people feel very uneasy, very discomfort. A lot of discomfort comes in many ways. It comes. A lot of people feel a sense of embarrassment. There's a sense of anxiety. There is shame, sadness, a lot of stress and regret that comes in. Also, this is the time when all of these feelings, or we are feeling all of this. Remember, there is a difficulty making sure there is a lot of difficulty in terms of dissonance and cognizance. So when all of these feelings are too much stacked in a person, remember, this discomfort asks us to change, and that change is attitude change. So the dissonance converts into consonant, which is this. So reducing dissonance and cognitive dissonance. Domestic abuse is bad and no one should put up with it. Behavior is I continue to stay in an abusive relationship. This is something which is dissonance. How to reduce it? My partner does not mean to hurt me, so that it is not really an abuse. And the behavior would be I'm not in an abusive relationship. I do not have any reasons for this. So this is both of the attitude and behavior change that we've shown. So that's how one way of changes takes place. Now, what can cause dissonance? What are the causes that leads to making sure that the cognitions function in opposite direction and we cannot do anything about it? So first time it is the forced compliance. We all know a lot of times our social conditions are filled with stereotypes. Our social conditions are filled with belief systems, some rituals, some thought process which is difficult to change. So sometimes it is forced compliance, request coming from elders, at times it's request coming from superiors. So sometimes we engage in this dissonance because there is an external pressure, there's an expectation of a superior, there is social pressure, there is peer pressure, it is difficult to avoid it. There is obviously pressure of the workplace. So when there are pressure of the workplace, I'm sure it is very difficult to avoid. We don't want to be fired, we don't want to be left out. That's what also psychologists have one theory about it, why people view groups and clubs worthwhile. So at times we do something because we want to be a part of a group. So even if it's dissonant, like children, do cigarette smoking and do other things under peer pressure. Why they want to be a part of that cooler, popular group? They don't want to be feel left out. They don't want to be feel aloof. So that's peer pressure. That's because people love to be in any kind of group, any kind of club, because human beings are social beings. We cannot exist alone. Also, at times, a lot of theory says there is effort justification. People believe, when people will believe a goal is worthwhile, they will work towards it. So even if they never reach their goal, they will justify their action. It is important to do this, I had to do. So we tend to justify our behaviors time and again. Like, for example, people indulging in cigarette smoking, they mention there is so much of stress, there is so much of anxiety, there is longer hours of duration of work. I need it as a stress buster. So that's like effort justification. Also, when we talk about in a club example, people will believe that group is always worthwhile. We should belong to it. We should never be leaving groups. So always remember, the biggest pressure in today's society is people continue to do dissonant activities. They continue to show the same cognitive dissonance. Why? Because of the fact of being in a group. They want to be a part of the group. They don't want to leave it. They don't want to be feeling opposite it. They don't even want to feel neglected, ditched by them. So that's how at times their beliefs do not align and they still continue to do it. They still feel that discomfort because they are socially pushed. So that's like few of the reasons. Another reason is people make decision, both smaller decisions, big decisions on daily basis. When we are faced with two similar choices, we often feel, we often are left with the feeling of dissonance, and options both are equally appealing. So at times, what happens is that it's like going to a party, or enjoying your work which is completely stressed up. And if you're stressed up, you will get into tobacco, and you get into taking tobacco under stress. And if you go to party, there could be some another kind of leisure or distraction. So both are so lucrative that at times the both decisions are dissonant, and we end up doing it. We choose the lesser discomfort. So it's like you do something which is lesser discomfort and lesser wrong in comparison, because there are no correct choices. Then there is persuasion. At times, person is persuaded, person is made convinced about a belief system so strongly that they feel that is the only way out of it. So that's one way. Now there is a dual process of persuasion that we are going to talk about, that tells us that why we do things which give us two cognition. Like children know that it's not good to eat chocolates, but they love it. They can't leave it. So see, that's again a dissonance. They know they will have numerous amount of cavity, but they will do it. They will still eat it. So you realize. So there is, at times there is so convincing. At times the availability of things are so much. So let's understand what is the dual process of persuasion. The two most prominent dual process models are elaboration likelihood model and the heuristic systematic model. So both persuades that persuasion is being convinced, operates on two different modes of information processing. So the way you put out information, one is more effortful and more deliberate, whereas the other is less resourceful and less analytical and demanding. So one is like something that leads you to formation and doing of things. The other is less demanding and you give into it. It's lesser of analytical, lesser logic. You don't want to think about it much. So you give into it. So for example, if someone is told that today going to this party is very important, many people are coming, popular people. It's less demanding, find popular people, let's go. You don't use your logic, you need to fill in contacts, but then the party will get in attitudes that you do not want to get into, which is getting into tobacco, getting into any kind of substance, etc., which is not good for teens or even early adults. Then there are at times the persuasion, the other is so resourceful. Like for example, you have to work on weekends at workplaces. And today there are MNCs that allow a little bit of things which are, little bit of alcohol and little bit of new trend age careers, which allows you to take in a little bit of substances within the work premises. So working in weekend feels very relaxed. So it's resourceful. You work there, you're allowed to do things which you could have done when you're at home and relaxed. So that's resourceful. You cannot leave it. So that's how persuasion, that's the kind of persuasion that we have. So let's see the two, the peripheral route and the central route. The peripheral states that you are not motivated, not analytical, there's less effort, you just have to go, it's a temporary change. Whereas the central route is more analytical, motivated, high effort, and there's a lasting change that tends to happen in you. So that's again a persuasion thing. Now let's understand that who gave what. The elaboration likelihood model of persuasion was given by uh, Richard Petty, and it was given by John Kakisipo, which is in early 80s. So when we talked about John and Richard, their goal was to just expand the theory to make us understand the two cognition of different direction, positive and negative, how they are getting persuaded in people. So they wanted to understand what is the cause change in attitude, which is like when we talk about how persuasion can cause changes in attitude with a particular focus on communication, including change. So communication is actually used as one of the most important and one of the most, I think, one of the only way people are persuaded today is great communication. So how communication influences a person's attitude, feelings, and behavior. People can be convinced to feel in a certain way depending on the kind of message that you portray, the way that you communicate it to them, and how it is received. So when we speak about it, communication in the elaboration likelihood model is considered to be one of the most central and particular focus. Why? At times, the way you convince it, the way you put it out, actually forms a persuasion and attitude for you. So, for example, if you convince an individual, that taking substances in a party is usually fine because they are the popular people. Their lifestyle is like that. Their way of living is like that. Remember, speaking it and communicating it in a way that it's important and it will not harm you at all, and it's no one is going to judge you. It's a part and parcel of being a part of this group. Remember, the attitude will be felt, will be changed, and worked accordingly by persuasion. Then we have the heuristic approach, which offers the most economic advantage by requiring very less effort, very less logic, and you do it. It's about the availability, the accessibility, the applicability. As I said, MNC allowing you to use a little bit of substances while you're at work, even on weekends, make you feel at home. So it's the availability there, makes you feel like you're at home, you feel relaxed, you don't have to use much logic, it feels like home to you. So availability means the knowledge structure is there of the heuristic and being stored in the memory. So accessibility of the heuristic applies the ability to retrieve the information. That means everything is on the table. You just have to just use it. So it's available. There's no logic. You tend to get persuaded easily because you do not use your own logic. There is not much effort. It's just available. You use it when it's there in front of you. So that's how you might not be a person who's using substances in day-to-day living, but the fact that it's available gives you, allows you the equal time, gets you the pay for extra waiting and extra working, and it's easy. You just have to be there and it's available. So that's how it's more economical, more resourceful. You do not use much of the brain. You're getting paid for being there too. So it makes sense, easy making sense for us. So that is something that we talk about the heuristic manner, the central root and the peripheral root, the image that you can see on your left. Remember, the central root is obviously high motivation, it's deep focused thought process, it's lasting change. Peripheral is very temporary. But remember, persuasion will always say it's very temporary as a change, it is requires lesser ability, but once we start thinking, we're working according to it, it might get into our behavior and becomes a part of us. Now, let's understand what are the factors that impacts persuasion. So, if you are talking about attitude change in people and you're using the technique of persuasion, what are the factors that can actually impact on your persuasion? Like, what will lead to persuading people faster? What will impact them of not getting persuaded? So, first is source variable in persuasion, which is attitude change. Source variable, let's just understand there are two thoughts. One is the source, the one who is persuading you. The other is the target, which is getting persuaded. And then, as we said, another factor impacting is the message itself. How is the message? Then, how is the message being? In what context? In what ways? In what pattern it's getting received? That's another thing that we have to talk about. Also, when we speak about persuasion, remember the way you communicate it also, that is something that you can also add it. One is the source, the other is the target, the other is the message itself, and the context can also include the mode. How are you delivering it to people? So let's consider first the source variable, the person who's persuading you. Remember, the person who's persuading you is very credible, high credibility, and there's a high amount of trustworthiness in the person. That means credible means very high knowledgeable, knows a lot of information. It's a complete fact building book that individual is, knows, has so many opinions. It's very motivating. You'll find them more credible. A person who's knowledgeable wins most of the persuasion, I feel. Then people who are trustworthy. Trust people that you can rely upon, people you can rely in terms of knowing that they are the expert, they are the expertise in there, and also at times attractiveness, physical also and social attractiveness, being popular, physical obviously being presentable, looked upon. All of this as a source is very persuading. Imagine a person who's selling you, a laptop on in a sales and marketing job also is coming from BCA, MCA background and actually tells you about computer application and what kind of laptop is suited as per your job. Would be more credible because it has more knowledge. And at the same time, the person is very well put up, very presentable, not shabby, physically attractive, and is looked upon in his career. Like in the job, everyone's asking for his advice. Remember, the person becomes attractive, the person is credible and is trustworthy. You tend to rely on such people and get persuaded quickly. Let's compare it to something else. A person who's into sales and marketing, selling with the object and the item, you tend to always feel, oh, they are just doing their own job and etc. You still use your brain. You still do your own research because you know this. You still look onto other websites and check which is more credible for you because you know the source is only doing their job. They're not an expert. You will not rely, you will not trust them with your money because you know their work is to make you spend more. So, more the source is trustworthy, credible, and reliable and attractive, the easy that you get persuaded, the lesser the difficult it is to make an attitude change in you. So, that's something that we need to understand when speaking of attitude change. Now, moving ahead, we talk about are there any other things? These are the character. This is like a one go image that you have. What can impact you? Source, target, message content, the medium, as I said. And also, this is an entire version adapted by Oskam in 1977. And persuasion process, you know, we tend to attend it, we comprehend, we feel accepted, greater, and then we do the action. So that's how we get persuaded in the process. Let's do other factors. Then we have something which we talk about is message variable. You know, message variable is equally important. Imagine if the way that you're communicating is simple language, is also very attractive. Also, at times, if it's easy to understand, it has the message is far more stronger. It is going to be influencing, more influencing. So remember, if the message that you are delivering, persuading appeal, such as its length, its complexity, its language, its comprehensibility is easy. Remember, it gets easier. And also, when people are unwilling and are not able to read the message properly, it has too many jargons. People tend to leave it. They will not be influenced. Why? Because you need to keep the message to be clear, lesser complexity, language to be simple. It should be of the appropriate length. Remember, let's take an example. When we have any sort of campaign which is going on of building more trees in the environment, creating less smoke. Remember, if the pamphlet is of 4 pages and you have to like read so much and it's less attractive, it's very complex. Remember, it's very tough to understand that message. You will tend to analyze it so much that you now will go as per the logic. It's not going to be as per the availability. Your central persuasion model will work, which is the likelihood model, not the heuristic model. So it has to be quick. It has to be simple. It has to be appealing. It has to have that simple language, simple understanding, easy language, shouldn't be too complex, and the quality of the argument should be strong. You need to talk about why saving trees are important, why creating less pollution is necessary, not only for today but later. So that's how messages can impact us and change our attitude. Then we have recipient variables. Recipient are target. That's us. So that's how, you know, if you are targeted, you are the individual who is the target and are the ones who needs to change, to be changing your attitude. What are the target, characteristics that will make you more persuaded than less persuading? So, you know, if the source are more credible, more talented, an expert, and also tends to be, when we talk about them, they also at the same time tend to be more trustworthy and attractive. You tend to get persuaded. Now, how are you if you're the target? See, if as an audience you're very intelligent, you tend to have stronger prejudices. You yourself has higher self-concept and self-esteem. It's difficult to persuade you. Intelligent people tend to rely on their own logic rather than getting easily persuaded. Also, the ones who have stronger prejudices, you know, they are coming with very strong held thought process about people. Remember, it's going to be very tough for people. And at the same time, if, for example, if you are, for example, if you are going to, let's take the same example, if you're going to take a laptop, you have very less knowledge about it. Also, the same, you have very, less idea about it. So there is no prejudice that is formed about technology, and there is a lesser self-esteem. You don't value you well. You feel, oh, I don't know much about the tech. So that something will make you more persuading by the salesman also. Now, at the same time, as an audience, if you're very intelligent, strongly held prejudices, you know what you want, you very high self-concept and esteem, it's tough. It's tough to change your mind. You'd rather just pinpoint on one model, you pick that up and you go on with it. That happens with cell phones with children today. I feel the younger adults are so so strongly held. I just need this model, no matter what. Parents keep convincing them it's okay, you can buy another one. They are so strongly held because they're intelligent. You know, I need this, I need it, I want it for whatever reasons. They're strongly held prejudices. They're obviously their high self-esteem. Their value rank themselves. I just need it. Also, younger adults, 18 or 25, are far more persuadable than the middle adult and the later, which is very true. You know, adolescent of 17, 18 are far more persuasive, and the early adults, which are 20, 21, 22, then people who are 29, 30, 35, and 40s, because they've lived a life, they have high self-concept, they have more idea about the world, they have strong ideas about what they want to do. So they will not change their attitude and get persuaded by you by anything that you put on the platter. So that's again a recipient variable. So now let's move ahead. Now we have resistance to persuasion. So, what will cause resistance that people, despite persuading, despite having the communication, despite having the idea about things, they will still not be persuaded. So, speaking of that, remember, we talk about some resistance, some problem that always tends to happen with children, and they tend to not get persuaded. So, speaking of that, there are some ways like being reactant. Reactance occurs reactance that occurs talks about, when prospect senses that someone is trying to compel them to do something, like when there's a coercion, when there's a lot of force that's coming into play, when you tend to automatically resist it. Like, there are times when people push you, let's do it now, right now, when there's too much of reactance, too much of push compellingness that's coming into play. Remember, that leads to a regular reaction. People don't do it. Like, I'll give you an example. Let's take an example. You have decided that today you plan to, in the evening, you sit for a while and meditate. Now, there's a friend who just comes in and says, let's not do it today. Leave it. It's not important. We can always make up time for it. And when it gets too compelling, too contrasting, remember, you might not take the persuasion of your friend and you continue meditating. Why? Too much of force, too much of contrastness produces reactance that leads to counter acting of the persuasion. You tend to do the opposite. That's that's very true. You tend to re-establish your own freedom to choose and think and grow rather than relying on somebody else's persuasion. This is human nature. If people force you too much on something, we tend to rather do what we want rather than, doing something that they have asked us to do. So this is something that we need to be very careful of and tends to happen. Then there is forewarning. Forewarning is warning that comes in advance, warning that tends to happen and tells you that this is something which is not good. So researches to date indicates that forewarning leads to greater resistance. When there are, let's take an example. You plan to go to a concert, which is like so usual in today's time. But there are so many warnings which are coming of the concert nowadays. Stealing, losing of things, people pickpocketing, hitting, violence, and stampedes, which is happening. You are about to buy the ticket, which is costing you, burning a hole in your pocket. But then you see so many videos which are like telling you in advance, okay, there is, pickpocketing that happens, that tells you there is stampede that leads to violence, people getting bruised, fractured. What are you developing? You're developing a resistance. Your attitude is getting questioned. You will not change. Why? Because there's a warning. You might someday receive a persuasive message allowing you to practice and then respond. So it gives you time to think. So at times, resistance to persuasion to do something could be a forewarning which is coming when that does not allow you to change your attitude. Also, this was given by Sangurin and Wood 2007, which has been very current and I feel, very recent, who says that at times, the forewarning keeps coming. Our persuasive message, just keeps getting weaker. The reason is because we have something which is moving in the opposite direction, which is warning us, and it creates a resistance in us already. Then we come to selective exposure. At times, we are not able to go with the persuasion is because we tend to build an attitude that is so strong and do not have any information, and that changes or impacts it. Thus, we tend to avoid any contradictory information. We do not have much idea about the communication of persuasion is so less. It's so miniature that we don't want to put anything on risk and we feel that it's okay. Let's not get persuaded because the information coming is not very strong and our attitude is very strong. And let's not go into contrasting, avoid any conflict later. Let's not get persuaded. Let not put our feet in two boats at the same time to cause any struggle. Then we talk about counter arguments. Counter arguments also suggest at times when we have debating, when we have attitude clashes, when we have inconsistencies in our attitude, remember persuasion doesn't work. When you're already thinking a positive, let's take an example, same example, when you already have a positive and negative about the attitude of going to a concert, remember when you already have built in an attitude which says that it's risky, it leads to losing of money, you're already thinking about both the prospects. Remember, it's counter arguments makes the persuasion, makes your buying of ticket lesser. The reason for that is that at times your attitude gets lessened because there's already an argument going on. So you might not take the ticket now. Why? Too many confusions, too many multiple attitudes, lot of argument, lot of people talking about it, just making you feel that this is very argumentative. Let's not get persuaded. Let's not see the concept and rather it's just human people. It's okay. Let's not waste so much of money. And it's that time of the year that will be very crowded. And so too much of argument at times leads to resistance to persuasion. We don't tend to go ahead with the persuading thought process and we don't, there is no attitude change because of this. Now, let's move to another new unit. We have understood how do we form attitude, a very core of social psychology. Attitudes, a state of mind, their opinions, their ideas about things, objective event, which is likely, when we talk about it, it's so likely to, takes place as soon as we meet people. We form an attitude, we form an impression, we want to why they behave like this, etc. So social psychology is filled with multiple attitudes. So in unit 5, we are going to talk about, is there any consistency between attitude and behavior? And what is the kind of relationship that attitude and behavior has? So unit 5 talks about relationship between attitude, behavior, determinants. So let's talk about what is the equation of attitude and behavior determinants. The first that we talk about, attitude specificity. So in order to predict the attitude will, an attitude will predict a behavior. Let's say the two to refer to same level of specificity. The general attitude do not associate to leading to the behavior. So remember, if the attitude, if you refer to it, the attitude is not specific. Its level of specificity is not there. It has too many branches of thought. The behavior will not take place. So attitude is one work timing, have to get up and go at the same time. If your work timings are not specific, there are 10 at some day, 9:30 some day, 10 o'clock some day, 10:30 some day, 8:30 some day. Remember, no specific ways of behavior, no attitude is being formed. Behaviors are not going to be specific. So your attitude needs to be sent, it needs to be aligned. It needs to be one. It needs to be specific. Specific the attitude, specific is your behavior. That's something that we talk about attitude change. Now, speaking of that, let's move to something that we talk about as another topic, which is self-awareness. How self-awareness becomes an important character between attitude and behavior trajectory. See, people can experience different kind of self-awareness. They can the strength, if they know what they're doing, if they're aware what they're doing is correct, that is going to influence and strength of relationship between the attitude and behavior. Essentially, the people who are privately self-aware, behave in line of their attitude. So people who are aware what they want to do, their attitude will lead to behavior. So who are publicly self-aware behave in the line of attitude they perceive majority of the people hold. So people who are privately aware, they know what they want to do. They know how they want to do. They know that what is correct and what is not correct. Remember, they tend to be far more aligned in attitude in comparison to other people. So let's take an example. People who know that they don't have to indulge in substances, it's not correct. It leads to altered state of mind. They need to a lot of diseases that comes in older age. I don't want to age early. I don't want to look aged early. I don't want to spoil my internal organs. Live heartily and healthily. They're aware of that. their behaviors are going to strongly align with that. Their use of substances is going to be minimal. But people who tend to become self-aware according to the larger section with a majority is going to do as the majority does. So their attitude is not aligned with their behavior determined. It's aligned with the majority of people behavior. So especially, when you have a physical audience present, you do as per the audience. And if there is, when we talk about internal self-awareness, strength is more. External self-awareness, your attitude leading to your own behavior is not guaranteed. It's not, because you work according to the public, you work according to the audience, not according to yourself. So that alignment of attitude leading to behavior will not take place. Then another thing is attitude accessibility. And attitude is accessible to the degree that it springs to the mind quickly. So obviously a highly accessible attitude is likely to stimulate more action because it is consistent to your behavior. So some attitude which are always there in your mind. Let's take an example. Discipline, if it's a part of an individual's life every day, it will lead to behavior consistently. But if your discipline is a part of you, like some days and you lazy the other days, you don't take yourself seriously the third day, it's not going to lead to any sort of change. So always remember, that's not going to lead to consistent attitude behavior determinants. So that's where if the attitude is accessible, it indicates higher conviction, higher depiction in behavior. If the attitude is lesser, it's lesser accessible, lesser strength. Obviously, there is lower accessibility and behavior is not going to be that predictable. We don't expect that you do the same thing every day. Let's take an example for an individual getting up in the morning at the same time is something which is a part of discipline. So if they feel getting up, seeing a sunrise is so important and they do it every time, they do it every morning and it's always there in their mind, they will never forget it. Their behavior is always going to be a representation of that. But they get up at 10 someday, 8 someday, 7 someday, 6 someday, 10:30 someday, 11:30. Remember, lower accessible attitude will not lead to a behavior. Their behaviors are not going to be aligned with their attitude. And an attitude will not necessarily predict behavior. So what predicts behavior better? If it's specific, if the attitude is specific, if you're more self-aware privately, if your attitudes are far more accessible, available in day-to-day living, you use it more often, you tend to apply it more often. Then after this, let's understand there are so many things that an attitude builds in us, so many ideas that an attitude builds in us. First is stereotypes. What are stereotypes? Stereotype means assuming that a group of people who share some characteristics and also share some attributes. So it's group of people and you feel that one characteristic is common in every one of them. So that's also, stereotypes can be both positive, it can be both negative, it can become also a part of one's identity. So you might start seeing a person like that always, you might start seeing them like that all the time, and it becomes a huge part of them, like it becomes a huge part of who they are and who they're not. So always remember, when we speak about people, when we speak about stereotypes about a cluster of individual, there are times that you tend to behave with people according to the stereotype that you've read. The reason for this is that stereotype is assumption about group of people having that similar characteristics. So you make that characteristic a part of their identity. It can negatively impact you. It can be very dangerous. It becomes too simple. It doesn't make you use your logic. These group of people have to do such a thing. So and at times it's very unfair because we don't think beyond that line. We don't go as per that, and it's something which is very difficult for us. Is that good? So always make sure when we speak about stereotypes and prejudices, they actually impact a characteristic of another individual. Also, stereotypes are both positive and negative. They are characteristic that you assume about a group of people. So a common characteristic everyone will have. It can negatively and even at times positively impact, becomes a identity, and it becomes very simple for us. We already know what we need to do with such group of people, because we have assuming their characteristics to be same. From stereotype, which is the cognitive component, because it's making things simple. It's the attribute, specific characteristic. It's the thinking component of attitude. We come to prejudices. Prejudice refers to the belief, the feeling, the attitude that we hold about a group. It's far more stronger. Remember, prejudices are not based on personal experiences ever. Also, they are prejudgments. They are originating from outside experiences. They are mostly negative in nature. So when we say they're mostly negative nature, remember, they're far more stronger than stereotypes. They're far more negative, and also they don't share your experience, your interaction. It's coming from the outer world. They're the prejudgment. Also, it's something which usually is outside the belief of your experiences. It makes you feel far more affective towards this, which is emotional. It tend to make you feel prejudiced against people. And like, for example, if you dislike somebody, you've got it that this person lies a lot, but you've got it from others. So before you start communicating, you've held a prejudice that this person is lying all the time. So anytime that person is being rude to you, you will justify how? With the prejudice that this person is lying to me. That's a confirmation bias. Prejudice becomes a confirmation bias. It's originating from outside. It isn't instinctive. It does not make you use your own instinct. You are completely shut. So prejudice as well as stereotypes lead to discriminations also, and most often they are learned. They are not. They're often taught to us. Things about some class. It's taught to us. It's been something that we've learned through ages and stages of our life, from the ancient time to the medievals that we have. So that is something. Stereotypes at times leads to prejudices, and they lead to discrimination at times, both of them. As mentioned, stereotype is the cognitive component. You can see the image on the left. Stereotype is the cognitive. How do you categorize? What kind of labels that you give? Prejudices are very affective. They're emotional. They tend to make you feel about that person that stronger about that stereotype. And after that leads to the behavioral component, which is discrimination. It is how do you act towards the person. It's such an intergroup relationship, the stereotype, prejudice, and discrimination. It makes things difficult. Like we can talk about the Nazis during the Second World War. It was all discrimination held against all the Jews that we had. So that's during Nazis' time in the Second World War that we had. Speaking of this, let's continue and understand what we went through today, and quick revision to sum the entire session. So speaking of that, today we started with attitude change. Attitude change came with two theories to us. The theory was attitude change was the balance theory. Balance talks about when do we change an attitude? When there's a state of imbalance. Imbalance amongst interpersonal relationships. Here we are not talking about ideas, but we are talking about interpersonal relationships among people, which was conclusively told to us in relationship with POX. That's the first summary that we have. P is the person, O is another person, X is the element. Balance was all positive or two negative and one positive. And imbalance is that gives us balance is something which is all negative or two positive and one negative. We need to change it. That's the time interpersonal relationship gets difficult. We need to change it. Then we came to cognitive dissonance, second way to change your attitude. That was by Leon Festinger, 1957. Leon Festinger stated that we tend to change a attitude when there are cognition which are conflicting, which are dissonant within it. Cigarette smoking is one example. I smoke cigarette and cigarette smoking is unhealthy. So remember, about the same attitude, you hold two different cognitions. It's conflicting. Obviously, it makes you feel guilty. It makes you feel embarrassed. It makes you feel sad that you're not able to leave it. This discomfort, this uneasiness, this conflicting thought needs an attitude change. Either you say that the cigarette smoking researches are not conclusive and I smoke cigarette, or you say that yes, I am trying to quit it and I know smoking is unhealthy. See, it leads to consonant. Attitude change is required. That these were two strong theories that talk about attitude change, and we talked about why dissonance usually takes place. When we are too forcefully compliant, requested by elders, requested by a prominent person, peer pressure, social pressure in the environment that tells us that we need to do this, it's important, then there is effort justification when things are easy. You tend to do a wrong thing because you're able to justify it, making it simpler for yourself. So that's how dissonance just keeps happening. At times, we decide the lesser bad, the lesser discomforting thing. So you do it. So at times, dissonating things continue because we choose there are decisions where both the things are appealing, and you choose the lesser dissonant thing. It is dissonant, but you choose the lesser dissonant. So it's having substances or taking tobacco. You feel let's take tobacco, let's not take substances. It's something like that. The lesser discomfort that you pick up for life. Ideally, both are the equally bad. You take that or the other. Then is we come to a concept of persuasion. When the persuasions are strong, we tend to stay dissonant. Persuasion takes place by through elaborate likelihood model or heuristic. Elaborate likelihood is a model where persuasion is strong, logical, resourceful. Heuristic is something when it's available. When persuasion is about the attitude is available. It's there for you. It's provided. It's temporarily changed. Then, when we talk about the two models, how does that leads to attitude change? Also, that talks about factors impacting attitude. So, speaking of factors that are impacting attitude, we talk about what can persuade us. There are message characteristics, there are source characteristics, which is source, message, target, and the way that you transfer. The way that you transfer is not discussed in the text. I'll help you do it through the image. Source characteristics is something when your source, the person who's persuading you, is intelligent, is credible, trustworthy, and physically attractive. Obviously, you tend to give away to it. A person who let's take an example. You are creating a fashion show for your group, and you need to create a designer dress. You look into all the Bollywood actresses, the new designs, the ramp walk, because they're attractive, they're more credible, they know the sense and the trends. That's how you're going to social media for all of that. Then we talk about the audience characteristic, which is source, which is the target. Sorry, the target talks about that here when we talk about the target characteristics would be people that when we talk about people that are lesser intelligent, low self-concept, has no idea about their attitude, they tend to get persuaded easily because they do not know what is to be done when they feel that it's let's just give into it because they have no idea. Then we talk about the medium the message is given and the message content. See, if the message content, the language is simple, it's specific, it's valid to the topic, it's simpler, and it's fluent and logical, it's strongly persuading. But remember, if the message is too complex, it's too very complex, it's too complex, and it's difficult to understand it, the comprehension is so long, it's coming in 10 pages, you might not have that much of time. It has to be attractive, quick, simpler, logical. Then medium, if you give it face to face, if you personally go and do it, if you personally go and deliver that message, you hand it over to the person personally, face to face, one on one makes far the difference. Persuasion gets stronger, your attitude will lead to persuasion that we talked about being far more stronger. Now, there are times that persuasion does not changes our attitude. Why? When it's resistance. Resistance talks about, when you compelling people to do something. When you compel the person to do something, the person automatically feels resisted, feels negative, feels pushed, rushed. They will not change their attitude. Then there are four warnings. If there are already warnings that are coming for your attitude that you're telling them to change, and that attitude is strongly coming into play, strongly being there, remember, it's going to be a tough thing. When there are warnings coming about the attitude, people usually be resisted to change their attitude. They will not, they feel this attitude is already getting warning, let's not make an attitude change and not get persuaded. So let's take an example. If you tell someone to buy a package to go out, and like for example, there is so much snow around the globe this time, and you tend to get a package of traveling irrespective of the risk of getting pushed in the snow. Traveling, commuting, taking cars is so difficult at this point of time, and they're selling you packages on cheaper mode. Remember, there are already warnings in the news and the newspaper and the social media. Remember, four warnings will make you resist the entire offer. Then there is selective exposure. If you know less about the attitude, obviously you will not get persuaded. And if there are too many debating, counter questioning happening, persuasion does not take place. Then we came to a new unit that we will continue in the next session that talks about the relationship between attitude and behavior. See, when we spoke about attitude and behavior, we need to know attitude does lead to behavior. So when we talk about attitude leading to behavior, there are times that your attitude specifically will lead to behavior, and there are times that attitude might not. When your attitude needs to be specific, it can only predict behavior when you're very fluent, when you know what attitude that you're talking about, and you do not get distracted. So behavior will be aligned. If you do 10 things and you want your attitude to be out of that 10 into 1, no, it will not happen. So, for example, if you're preparing for a very higher competitive paper and you are very distractively working towards it, people will also predict your attitude not to gain that competitive paper and score. Why? Because your attitude shows that the specificity is not there. Then there is self-awareness. This is one of the most important one, I feel. As we sum up our class today, you need to know being self-aware is equally important for attitudes. So if you're aware about your attitudes, if you have an idea about somebody and you know why, how, and for what, why do you hold it, you will obviously behave in that particular manner. But if you're doing it publicly, remember your attitude will be publicly leading to public submission behaviorally also, which means if you are self-aware publicly, which is you tend to understand a concept only in a public scenario, only in when you are with people and you think like that, you will behave also the way the majority of public does it. Haven't you see when people are confirming with other people and they say yes to everything because others are saying? That's public awareness, not private. Also, if your attitude is readily available, which is you already have the stimulation of attitude time and again, remember it will always lead to behavior. As high accessibility leads to higher prediction of that behavior. Low accessibility is a lower prediction of behavior. It's as simple as that. It's this leading to that. Now we come sum up today's session by telling that what is making you discriminate people. So, what is discrimination in attitude? Remember, the behavioral part of attitude is discrimination, where we discriminate people on so many things, the way you don't talk to them, the way you put up yourself. Remember, it's all attitude. Attitude is leading to that factor. So, when we talk about discrimination, remember, speaking of discrimination, it's the behavioral component of attitude. So, what is the thinking component? Let's look at the image again. The thinking component is stereotype. Your stereotype will make you label people, make you think about it. You will categorize people and tell them that all of them have the same attributes. They're a group, they all categorize the same. Also, holding stereotype saves time. It is easy. It simplifies things for you. You don't use your brain much because you're going to talk to this group of person. They're always like this. Also, it's a little dangerous because you do not tend to be using your own mind. You tend to be very judgmental and a little unfair at times. And prejudice is mostly negative in nature. This is how you feel about the person. This is the affective component. This is your feelings, your belief system about, so your feeling, thought, belief, everything comes here because you're feeling for it. So prejudice is usually external. Remember, external in nature. They are prejudgment, not coming from your own experience. It's being made taught to you. And also prejudice just helps you confirming things. It just becomes a confirming bias. So once you behave in a certain way with somebody, it just tells you, yes, it is because I've got this idea from other people. It helps you justify things easily. So that's like a confirmation bias. It helps you justifying things. It helps you rationalize things better and keeps you away from the blame also. And remember, prejudice strongly leads to discrimination. So discrimination is the behavioral component. So remember, if you label somebody as incapable, and then you feel that they're also, because you see their work not coming up to mark, you will not give them a certain set of categories. You will avoid them a job. You will avoid them a task. So that's where, when we talk about stereotypes, prejudice and discrimination, our attitudes are so strong that it can nor just change our behavior, change our attitude towards people and the way we think about them. It can also change the way we feel and start discriminating people. So that's how attitudes are so strong and they can be, why did we study this? to tell you how attitudes can be predicted in your behavior. So stereotypes and prejudices both are learned. Always remember, they are not coming. Prejudices are never coming from our personal experiences. So next time when we are holding a set of idea about people, always remember it might be a prejudice which is reflected in your behavior. We will continue with Unit 5 talking about how the attitude and behavior relationship continues. Thank you.